Welcome to Lock It Down Sports. I'm your host, Locke Hoover. You can follow me on Twitter at Lock It Up Media. That's Lock It Up Media on Twitter. You can also follow us at E5280 Sports. That's E5280 Sports. And today on the show, I want to just talk about just how dominant Greg Maddux was. The power of college football and the coaches display that. And the start of college football. But first, I want to get into this. I'm about to say a really bold statement right now, a really hot take, okay? So just bear with me for a second. Talent wins. Really, it does. I know, really eye-opening, huh? But I want to show you how prevalent and even more so it is in college football. So, based on the recruiting rankings, no team outside of Michigan last year has won a national championship with their roster rating outside of the top 10. And that is cumulative of stacking top recruiting class after top recruiting class after top recruiting class. Michigan was 16 last year. So in the last 10 years, only 7 teams have made the playoffs that have rankings 16 or lower. Or excuse me, that are outside the top 10, sorry. And how did they do that? Well, in 2 cases, it was a top-tier quarterback at Oklahoma and Baker Mayfield. Or this school had a record number of its draft picks in program history. So, for example, when Cincinnati made it with Fickell and Desmond Ritter, Luke Fickell as the head coach, and Desmond Ritter and Jerome Ford and all in that group. Then you had TCU 2 years ago, Washington last year, but also Washington had a first-round draft pick in Michael Penix. So some of that goes hand in hand, and that could fall in the first bucket there with a first-round top-tier quarterback, but also a ton of draft picks, most in program history. So with that being said, this is why I really like what Josh Heupel is doing and where Tennessee is sitting right now, as cumulatively they are 17th in the rankings this year. 17th. Which, yeah, I mean, middle of the pack, top 25, outside looking in that top 10. But here's the thing. They have the potential, I think, to get in the playoff this year. But in the coming years, I think they're in a really good position. Why? Because the talent has increased every single year under Josh Heupel. The other thing, this quarterbacks that the Tennessee has been able to recruit, where they're running 4- and 5-star recruits out every single year from the class of 2023 to 2026. So, yeah, they have an elite quarterback in every class on paper. Yeah, some of those are going to transfer out, but you're still going to have a 4- and 5-star quarterback if 1 or 2 of those guys transfer out. On paper, it looks good. Yes, they still got to perform. They still got to be coached up. They still got to play. All that, of course, happens and is a thing. But that's a good start as they're growing and they're continuing to stack depth and stack quality recruiting classes. And speaking of recruiting classes, currently they're sitting at the 6th ranked class right now in 2025. And that can only go up based on the number of recruits they're currently getting, the people that are wanting to come and have committed to Knoxville. I mean, Tennessee is building, and it takes time to get to depth all over the place. Look at Georgia, depth all over the place. It took them time. Yeah, and were they start from a better position? Absolutely, they were when Kirby took over for Mark Richt, as opposed to Heupel took over for Jeremy Pruitt. Still, obviously, Kirby's done a great job. There's no denying that. But a different spot in the talent from when each coach took over. And Tennessee's building, and they're doing it at a high level. And that's just where they're at. Now, you say 17th, that's pretty good, right? And why I go and shrug the shoulders, there's 7 schools ranked ahead of Tennessee that are currently, that as I currently sit at 17. 7 schools. Then you have 4 SEC schools directly behind Tennessee that are ranked 18th, 19th, 20th, and 21st. Then the next SEC school is ranked 24th. It doesn't stop. 7 schools in front, 4 schools directly behind you, and then 1 right there nipping at the heels in the top 25 at 24. One bad recruiting year could have major effects on down the line. You have to continue to stack class on class on class, especially in this league, the SEC, because every week's a battle. The talent gap is almost in such thin, small margins that you have to continue to build and build and build and build until you're there and you're ready to go. And that's what Tennessee's still trying to do. They've got one part down, that's getting the quarterback. From what we've seen in Nico starting this year, and then the depth in the quarterback room that is to follow. It's deep, it's getting deep, and it's getting better. And that's the first chance they're going to have to be competitive in the SEC, a dynamic quarterback, while continuing to build depth along the lines and everywhere else. So it's progress. They've got a chance to get in the playoff this year. I mean, I think it's going to come down to a few games. Georgia's probably lost. So that Oklahoma game, really big. Florida's always big. You want to always beat Florida. And for whatever reason, it doesn't matter how bad Florida is. It's always a game for us because they're always talented. There's no doubt about it. Florida's always talented. They're one of the schools that's ahead of Tennessee in the ratings. Always good. Doesn't matter the coach. Tennessee struggles against Florida for whatever reason. When other schools, say a Kentucky school can beat Florida at times, it's like, why do you struggle so much with the Gators? Is it a mental block or what? But it's always a tough game. We should win that game this year. But we should have won it last year too. So there's that. So there's a fighting, punching chance. Some analysts have predicted Tennessee getting in. So they're 10-2. I think that gets us in. Say the 2 losses are Alabama and Georgia, we get in. Say we lose to Oklahoma, 9-3, maybe. Depends on how things shake out. Wait and see, obviously. But with this 12-team playoff, you get more of a puncher's chance having 2, potentially 3 losses, depending on how things shake out. So that's really where it's at and what it's going to be like this year for the playoffs and where Tennessee is currently sitting. Now, speaking of currently sitting, that's the power college football head coaches have And if you're a college football head coach, your ego gets bruised. You don't like stuff from fans. You don't like stuff from reporters. Know what you can do? You can just ban them. You can block them. That's exactly what Dion Sanders did last week because he didn't like what a columnist from the Denver Post was writing, saying bad things about the program. Which, to me, I think is pretty rich coming from someone named Primetime. I mean, the guy goes by Primetime, Coach Prime, and the media is not allowed to address him by his real name. Dion, obviously, or Coach Sanders. That's your name, dude. And I can't say, hey, Dion, Coach Sanders. No, it's got to be Primetime. You went 4-8 last year. And you're mad because a reporter wrote something you didn't like that was negative, derogatory towards your program. What'd you expect? You're Dion Sanders. You go by Coach Prime. You're supposed to be prime time. And your prime time results last year are 4-8. How's that prime time? How's that big? Now, it's interesting because he was in the media. He was at ESPN. He was at CBS. I'm about to sneeze. Hold up. Sorry there. But he was in the media. I don't have a cough button. I know. I'm not fancy like that. He was in the media with CBS and ESPN. What if he was not allowed to go to a press conference or an interview at all? What would his response be? What would he say on his next show on air that he had, I could see he could ring out and just crush that coach that he was trying to interview, trying to get a clip from a soundbite from a whatever. It's also in his contract where he only has to speak to mutually agreed upon media. It's in his contract. So if he didn't want you there, he can say, kick rocks. He pulled the same stunt at Jackson State too, after banning a reporter about not liking what he wrote. Which is interesting when you, Dion Sanders, are always all about that media as a player and in the media, giving them quotes, giving them something to go, giving them something to run with. Why? Because you're a winner. You're a Hall of Famer. You're succeeding as a player. The role is reversed a little bit, isn't it? It's another thing with this whole thing. Doesn't he have a lot more to worry about than getting his feelings hurt from a reporter writing bad things about him, about his program, when he's making $5.7 million, which isn't a lot? It's not the huge numbers that Dabo and such are making, that Jimbo obviously just got fired for. We're making. But shouldn't he devote a little bit more time to trying to win? Recruiting high school kids and recruiting as a whole, which he doesn't recruit, except for the portal. Doesn't go to high school kids, shake their hands, kiss their babies, that sort of thing. He don't want to. But he's worried about what a reporter says to potentially affect his program. 4-8 tells it all. That's what really is truly affecting your program. Now, if there's progress, you go 6-6. Okay, you know what? Dion potentially building something in Colorado, but another losing season. Boy, oh boy. Speaking of boy, oh boy, I don't know if you saw this. Obviously, I'm a Braves fan, but the MLB Network documentary on Greg Maddux was so good. If you're a sports fan, a Braves fan, definitely go back and watch it. I'm sure they're going to do some more on. They'll replay it, obviously, but other players, like, those are just so fascinating. Some are better than others. But I think the two big things for me that were, well, there's a few things, but like off the top here, what was really well done to me was the back and forth with him and Barry Bonds was so fascinating. Just the thought process of Bonds and Maddux going head to head, of just the individual duels of pitch selection, of what Maddux is thinking here to try to get Barry out, what Barry was doing, looking for certain pitches, knowing, you know what, Maddux can't come into me, or he's going to throw that changeup away right there, and then he's going to come inside, or if he does come inside and misses, it's going 420 feet. Just them walking through the at bats they had. I think it was about 3, maybe 2 or 3, about what they're looking for, what they were trying to do. Very, very fascinating. I think the other one that was funny too was Leo came out to take out Greg Maddux. And Greg looks at him like, Leo, what are you doing here? And he goes, I'm here to take you. No, you're not taking me out, Maddux says. And Maddux goes, Leo, here's how I'm going to get this guy out. I'm going to throw this pitch, and he's going to pop it up to Chipper. Lo and behold, it's exactly what happened. Of course, Bobby and Leo were just laughing in the dugout after Maddux came in, but they showed us the quick of shot. Bobby was pissed. He was ticked off that Maddux wasn't coming out of the game. But Leo's just like, all right, go do your thing, Mad Dog. And he did. But this is the other thing I looked at that I wanted to talk about. So, glad, Maddux is 4 Cy Young Awards. 4. I'm going to be comparing Greg Maddux's year to 2 guys who could potentially win the Cy Young this year. We're going to go with Chris Sale in the National League and Tariq Skubal in the American League. So I'm just, like I said, I just picked one of Greg Maddux's 4 Cy Young's award-winning years. So I picked 2000, funny. I picked 1995. That was his second lowest innings total at 209 2/3 innings. And that was due to 144 game schedule coming after the strike in 95. That year, 19-2, a 1.63 ERA, and 26 starts. He had 181 Ks, a whip of .81. But we're going to bump that back a little bit. So through August, so we're basically done with August now. Through August, Maddux had 178 2/3 innings and 23 starts. So remember that, 178 2/3 innings and 23 starts. Chris Sale currently is 15-3 a 2.58 ERA in 25 starts. And in those 25 starts, 153 in 2/3 innings. So he might win the Cy Young, and he probably won't get to 200 innings. So remember, look at this. Maddux, in less starts, had 25 and 2/3 more innings than Chris Sale. We got 28 games left. So that's 4 or 5 more starts for Chris Sale. Okay? Say he goes 7 in all of those starts, which he probably won't. But say he goes 7 in those 5 starts, that puts him at 188 and 2/3 innings. And that's potentially your Cy Young Award winner. Absolutely deserves it. No doubt about it. Chris Sale, dominant this year. Where would the Braves be without Chris Sale? Dominant year. Scooble. He's sitting at 15-4, a 2.58 ERA, 160 and a third innings, and 26 starts. Once again, Maddux, through the end of August, 179 2/3 innings with 23 starts. Detroit's got 27 games left, so that's 4 or 5 starts. Let's just say, like, once again, Scooble goes 7 innings in those 5 starts. That gets him to 195 and a third innings. Think about that. Still not even 200 innings. Could potentially win the Cy Young. That's just amazing to me. Yes, different time with the innings pitched, guys not going deepest games, the analytics, all that. But it's just interesting. Greg Maddux's second lowest season, when he won his Cy Young awards, will still throw more innings and be more dominant than the 2 potential Cy Young Award winners this year. Although I do find this funny because like I just said, we're talking about the errors. In 209 and 2/3 innings, Maddux had 181 strikeouts. Chris Sale in 153 and 2/3 already has 197 Ks, and Scooble has 193 Ks and 160 and a third innings, which once again, it comes to the errors of more strikeouts, more guys not trying to hit for contact, more guys trying to hit home runs. But just amazing what Maddux has done, what he did in his career. And, oh yeah, Maddux's other Cy Young Award winning seasons, just innings count, he went 263, 268, 267, 202, and that was his lowest year. That was a strike year. So they played a lot less games in 1994 due to the strike. They ended in early to mid-August? He still had 202 innings. Incredible. Absolutely incredible what he did. It's a really good documentary. And that go back and watch it if you haven't yet. Maybe you DVR'd it and checked it out. It's really good. And that was just the thing I thought about. They were just showing the innings count that Maddux had and like his numbers, mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. That's the reason he's a Hall of Famer and first ballot and all that. But that was like two things I thought about in that doc when it came to Greg Maddux. Now, football's finally here. College football is finally here. Truly, it starts this week, although we did have week 0 with Georgia Tech and Florida State. And you call it an upset. I don't really want to call it an upset yet because it's preseason rankings. And how good are teams really? Where are they? Where do they stand? And that's, Georgia Tech beating Florida State in week 0 in Ireland. That's a big win for Tech in that program. Anytime you beat Florida State, it's a big win for them and that program and Brent Keys and what he's doing, what he's trying to build on the flats at Georgia Tech. Tech looked good. They were able to run that football, move it, and defensively, they were a controlled DJ. It's a big one for Tech. I mean, big picture, Florida State was a top 10 preseason team. And in the college football playoff preseason. But with this, to me, with this 12-team playoff, it's just a unfortunate loss to Georgia Tech. It doesn't eliminate you. I don't think it does. Because they can still win an automatic berth with the ACC bid. I don't know. If you lose to Georgia Tech, he's probably going to be 6-6, 7-5, maybe 8-4, maybe. I don't see Florida State getting in 14 playoff, even if that's their only loss most years. I mean, maybe, but that can end up being a bad loss for them. Now, heck, Florida State might end up going 6-6. Then it's okay, chalk it up. But if they're as good as people are projecting, whatever. In this new 12-team playoff, because they could run the table, beat Clemson, get in. Now, but with this Florida State loss to Georgia Tech, they might not get their two bids in at large. The other at large team, if it is an ACC school, it's going to be Florida State or Clemson. Maybe NC State, but hopefully Tennessee can take care of them, and it's kind of a moot point with NC State next week. But it's, cool, we got Florida State, we got Clemson. Maybe one gets in at large. Maybe that's gone now because you lost to Georgia Tech. Maybe. Obviously, wait and see, but not as bad of a loss with this 12-team playoff as it would have been a 14 playoff. Because they can still get in. Depending on how things shake out. Committee members tend to forget what happens early in the season and put more weight later in the season. Not right, but that's what it is. Not how it should be, but that's how it is. So we got some other big games obviously coming up this week as in tomorrow, this weekend, I mean. And on into Labor Day, we got Clemson, Georgia. Should be a fun one. I like Georgia in the game. Based on what we saw from Clemson last year and obviously Georgia last year as well. They had Carson Beck coming back. Georgia lost a lot of guys, but they've just been reloading. Big game. Once again, there's room for error for either one of these teams because of the 12-team playoff. Texas A&M, Notre Dame. Another big one. More for Notre Dame than for Texas A&M. Why? Notre Dame's the highest they can be is a 5 seed because they're not going to be a conference champion. Texas A&M, we'll see. New coach. They've got talent, no doubt. New coach, though. Always a wait and see. LSU, Southern Cal should be a good one. Important game once again, early season. And then you got Florida, Miami, which I'm glad they're playing again. All 3 Florida schools playing. I think it's good for college football and definitely just the state. I mean, that was used to be like yearly. Florida State always, Florida State, Miami when they were the Big East, and then now the ACC, of course, and then Florida, Miami. I mean, that was like the round robin, the circuit that they played is great. I think that's important. They don't do it every year, which I wish they would. That's one thing they should do, but you know how college football is these days, rivalries and all these things change. But yeah, And I one other thing too, I like big early games, week 1, week 2, just to see where your school's at. And also, I think it starts college football with a bang. Ramps up college football, brings the excitement immediately, week 1, week 2. And also for like the school's perspective, you play a good opponent, or at least Power 5. I keep saying Power 5. It's going to trip me up this year. Power 4 school, week 1, week 2, before you get into conference play. I like that. You play a decent to quality to pretty good opponent, someone who's got typically more talent than a Kent State, an Akron, a Bowling Green, MTSU, Louisiana Tech, More talent, better school, bigger program. Maybe it's on the road, maybe it's at a neutral site, but you're getting that feel, you're getting that more talented school before you get into your conference play, which is obviously a lot more important this year in college football. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Lock It Up Media. That's Lock It Up Media on Twitter. You've been listening to Lock It Down Sports. I'm Locke Hoover. I'll talk to you next week.